course of 2 to 10 minutes, a rapid succession of exercises cut to the beat of an inspirational song conveys the entire duration of a character's preparation for the final duel. The paradox of training montages is that they convey the grueling, torturous, and monotonous process of training for a fight by means of a sizzle reel. There is a giant disconnect between the feeling of working out and watching a training montage. Training montages are beautiful because it makes me believe that I could become the world heavyweight boxing champion while sitting on the couch. It is one of the most glorious inventions ever caught on film, and I will never tire of watching them. No movie has milked the teat of training montages more than the Rocky franchise, the benchmark of gym bro cinema. Rocky movies are just vehicles for training montages. They are the best scene and the only scene. But which is the best of the best? I plan to find out over the course of a very sad day, as I watch all of them, Roman numeral by Roman numeral, until I turn my life from the underdog state that it is in into a great American champion, one montage at a time. Just like the movie, the Rocky V training montage tries something different with disastrous results. This montage is a compilation of Rocky's short-lived prodigy Tommy Gunn winning fights and training for them. Rocky isn't the one training. In a Rocky movie, Tommy Gunn punches a lot of guys, but the only guy I want to punch is Rocky, as he gives away Apollo Creed's shorts and passes on his torch of iconic exercises to Tommy Gunn, which feels unearned, since up to that point we're about as endeared to Tommy Gunn as I am to my stepdad. We barely know the guy. Instead of each shot being intentional, it feels like they padded out the montage to fill the time it takes for the song to play. The montage also features the disappointment of Rocky's son, Robert. The shots of Robert being sad by his father's absence clash tonally with the funky tunes of Joey B. Ellis's Go For It. I'm not sure what emotion is trying to be evoked, disappointment, enthusiasm. For me, it was none, except for one. Stone cold boredom. The Rocky Balboa montage is a lot like an old man rambling about how cool he was in high school. It suffers from a common disease that plagues too many bad sequels: aimless nostalgia, remembering the good old days without breaking into any new and interesting territory. The montage is mostly made up of Rocky lifting a variety of heavy weights, which in terms of spectacle isn't compelling, especially the way the movie presents it. He also recreates exercises from the first movie, and the choice of music is once again Bill Conti's Gonna Fly Now. It lives and dies on the back of the first Rocky, and as a result withers away into obscurity, the argument for its existence crumbling beneath its feet. Don't get me wrong, the message of it being worth it for older guys to get fit is one worth preaching. Problem here is that the preacher sucks at his job. The only positive is that Rocky's dog has a little gray sweater, and that's pretty damn cute. It also doesn't help that the cinematography looks more like a sequel to Saw than Rocky. With this movie comes a big step up in terms of quality. From here on out, I love these scenes. They are all beautiful machismo spectacle, and my ranking of them comes down to nitpicking the little things. The reason why Creed 3 is so low is that it portrays a variety of over-the-top, cinematic, explosive exercises without having much reason or meaning behind them. Looking cool is not enough. It's a great concept, contrasting Adonis and Damien's workouts, intercutting them doing similar training. I'm guessing the idea is to show just how evenly matched they are and build up the uncertainty of the final fight's outcome. The problem being that we already know who is going to win. Ultimately, it's a case of too much for too long. Clocking in at 6 minutes and 45 seconds, this is the second longest montage from either franchise, but it doesn't pace itself. With each inhuman bout of strength, the next one becomes less impressive until it gets a bit boring. It doesn't motivate me to go to the gym because he's pulling a fucking plane and punching a tree, which is awesome, but if I'm going to nitpick, which I am, I do prefer the more grounded montages. Culminating in Adonis's outcry over the Hollywood sign, it cements itself as the biggest training montage, but not the best. The biggest weakness here is that it doesn't stand out on its own. It's a good training montage, but it's not a good Rocky II training montage. The problem being that it's too general. We went from having Rocky punch meat, do one-arm push-ups, and climbing steps in his dorky gray sweatsuit, to having him doing standard gym staples. It makes sense, but it's not exciting, except for the chicken chasing, which is a really fun addition. Even when he is doing more unique exercises like the duck walk with a log on his back, there isn't a deeper story-driven reason for him to be doing it. Its strongest element is the second part of the montage, which plays off the first movie by having Rocky run through the same locations, except this time, he's famous. Rocky being chased by a mob of kids who were more than 800 local school children is a terrifying visual and a great representation of the cultural impact of the first film.
Holy shit. Hundreds of them.
It's also worth noting that the Rocky II montage is preceded by the birth of Rocky's son, and one of the best lines in the entire series, making it one of the best build-ups into a montage.
There's one thing I want you to do for me.
What?
Come here.
What?
Win. Win.
What are we waiting for? Take this!
Good training montages are like musical numbers. They are pieces of spectacle that drive the story forward while representing the story's message and themes in an emotionally heightened way. Creed II is a beautiful example of this, putting emphasis on the father-son relationships as Drago trains his son and Rocky trains the son of his best friend, who was killed by Daddy Drago. Creed II has got a lot of emotional baggage coming in from Rocky IV, so it's only fitting that the montages are similar. It borrows the high-tech, manufactured setting of the antagonist, cut against the protagonist's agony in an unforgiving natural setting. This time a desert in New Mexico, the rawest training setting imaginable. It's even got insert shots of mean-looking guys and dogs. It's also great to see a montage break free from the city to take advantage of the unforgiving prettiness of the great outdoors. It's really smart how most of Adonis's exercises are about withstanding punishment while Victor deals out punishment, illustrating how much of an underdog Adonis is here, until the second part of the montage when Adonis balances out the taking and giving. The Rocky references don't stop at Rocky IV. The burning oil drum, the profile Steadicam run, and the intermission with our protagonist talking with his loved ones. I love to see Rocky fully taking on the role of trainer, this time for a character that we care about. The choice of music is sensational. It's a mix between Ludwig Goransson's composition, the soulful vocals of Jacob Banks, A$AP Rocky's invigorating bars, and finishing off with the lyrics of Gonna Fly Now. You can tell a lot of care was put into constructing this, from the thoughtful references to previous films, the high-octane filmmaking, and Michael B. Jordan's Delta routine. I love how simple the Creed montage is. It doesn't get caught up and convoluted in a lot of showy exercises. It's mainly just running and boxing, and the execution of those minimal elements gives it maximum impact, from the strong composition to the choppy editing and especially the interruption between the intense agony of training to Rocky's much more painful fight with chemotherapy, which gives the scene a brutal emotional core, especially seeing how disease can break down Rocky, a character that's a symbol of fitness. It's real and it's painful. I really want to highlight Ludwig Goransson's composition here because it's essential. It's such a strong, modern reinterpretation of Bill Conti's original score. Apparently Goransson recorded sounds of a boxer jumping rope and hitting the bag and made those sounds into beats and rhythms for the music, which is the coolest thing ever. The rhythm of the editing and the music work in tandem. From Goransson's driving composition, which has its own musical peaks and valleys, transitioning to Philly-born rapper Meek Mill's lyrics, starting off the final section of the montage in such a powerful way. Adonis's slow motion run with the bikes zipping past him is nothing but glorious. It's an end that's on par with the first Rocky, and the music is doing the emotional heavy lifting. Intentional, iconic, intense, a joyful punch in the middle of a slow romantic drama. The montage from the first Rocky is beautiful. It's the first time audiences' ears were blessed with Bill Conti's composition of those now seminal trumpets, both funky and triumphant. Rocky beating me is such a fun way to subvert his impoverished circumstances into a tool to fight his way to the top. I love how the montage is a portrait of Philadelphia, featuring not only gritty urban locations but also people. Real Philadelphians who didn't know they'd be extras in one of the most recognizable scenes on film, since most of this was shot without filming permits throughout the city, as well as inspiring future montages and films inside and outside of the Rocky franchise. It's also inspired millions of people to make something of themselves. It is probably the most iconic and recognizable training scene ever. It's also one of the first applications of a revolutionary piece of film technology. To capture the shots of Rocky jogging down the wharf or up the steps of the Philadelphia Art Museum, Garrett Brown was hired to use his latest invention, the Steadicam.
I began to think that there has to be some way to isolate a camera, which wants to move smoothly, and a human being, which is always in motion. There has to be some way to disconnect the camera from the human, but let the human carry the thing, because I loved handheld, but I hated this.
Rocky's clumsy run is captured with impossibly smooth camera movement. With Bill Conti's score layered on top, Rocky's not running, he's flying, conquering those steps and taking on the opportunity of a lifetime. What makes this montage really stand out is the inclusion of a new coach and training partner in Apollo Creed. This scene is the culmination of 3 movies worth of rivalry turned friendship. It's the perfect example of spectacle emphasizing the story. The boldest and most stylized shots in the montage are its best. The slow motion race between Apollo and Rocky is the stuff of art. The jiggle physics on Stallone's face, Weathers slowly turning his head to see if he's being beat, it's untouchable. Adrian being there to encourage Rocky is very sweet. It gives us a tangible sense of what Rocky is training for. Rocky's new emphasis on footwork is really fun to look at, and we cap it all off with 2 burly men splashing around in water, hugging each other with goofy smiles, giving Stallone his equivalent of the Predator bicep handshake. My only gripe is them using Gonna Fly Now again. Of course it works, there's no way it wouldn't, but it would have been really cool if they used Eye of the Tiger instead. By far the longest montage, coming in at 2 parts, spanning 7 minutes and 45 seconds of 80s macho madness on steroids. The stakes motivating Rocky to brave the Russian cold could not be higher. His best friend has been killed by the Russian Terminator, by far the most intimidating of Rocky's adversaries. Sporting a beard and a drive for revenge, Rocky uses the unforgiving climate to prepare against his most impossible challenge yet, while his opponent is rigged up to the most modern pump-inducing Soviet technology. From a filmmaking perspective, this is without a doubt the boldest, most creative, and confident montage. It's got its own unique sound, its own unique environment, and the editing is cracked, breaking free from the first Rocky. Up to this point, the Rocky montages are mostly made up of wide shots of the protagonist performing the exercise. This one is abundant with quick cuts, insert shots, and focus pulls. There's an element of danger and mystery from the Russian agents watching over Rocky's training, as we're unsure of their motives, of whether or not they'd sabotage Rocky's training. The match cuts are so immediately gratifying. Match cuts meaning a visual repetition between two separate shots. Not only is it really cool, but matching the movements of each opponent brings new meaning. In this case, it's a story of contrast in training, accentuating Drago's measured, analytic approach against Rocky's makeshift one. Man versus machine, individualism versus collectivism, democracy versus communism. It's a simple concept edited masterfully, which isn't only present in the repetition of exercises with similar movements, but also in the lighting. From the fire flickering on Rocky doing pull-ups to the cold flares of artificial light illuminating Drago punching a guy in the face. It's always fun to look at, from the glow of an incomprehensible gangle of numbers and readings, to the barren snow-covered beauty of Wyoming parading as Russia, to those close-ups of sweaty muscles. Each exercise is novel and exciting, the intermission is one of the most heartfelt moments in any Rocky movie, and the entire damn thing is absurd. And that absurdity is earned and integral to the story. The process of training isn't ever as easy or triumphant as is conveyed in these montages. But the goal of training montages isn't to realistically represent training. Rather, they represent the ideal of training. It's not about what working out feels like, it's about what working out represents. A fight to improve oneself. While the Rocky fights are battles against another person, the Rocky training montages glorify the more heroic and important act of fighting yourself, of discovering your limits, of making something out of nothing. The surprising thing about the Rocky movies is that they're not mostly hot garbage. Usually the pattern of successful movies that spawn a zillion sequels is pretty depressing. There's the wholly original, or first two, followed by the zillion mediocre sequels, then eventually, after a brief hiatus, legacy sequels that are also dog shit, yet still gross $100 million. In my opinion, the Rocky and Creed franchise only have two bad movies, which has got to be one of the best track records for a Hollywood franchise. According to Wikipedia, there's a 7th Rocky film, a prequel television series, a 4th Creed film, and various spin-offs in development, which is a lot. But whatever comes next, I'll be watching at least one scene from each of them.